How do you bypass the Enduramax digital maximizer on these cheap Minn Kota trolling motors so that it will work with your Autoboat unit? In this video, we're going to show you how to do that. So if you purchased one of the Autoboat GPS units to install on your trolling motor and you have one of these Enduramax or any of the other kind of trolling motors that have a digital maximizer, which is like a pulse width modulation that helps increase the efficiency and make your battery life last a little longer, those kind of units will not work with the Autoboat. You're going to need to bypass them. I don't have all of the trolling motor models that have a digital type maximizer. So to demonstrate it today, we're going to be using this Minn Kota Enduramax that has a digital maximizer. This particular model is the 45-pound thrust, but all of the ones that have the digital maximizer from Minn Kota look exactly the same. If you have one of the other brands, it's probably going to be similar, but I don't have them here to actually demonstrate. So I'm just going to use this one for today. First thing you're going to want to do is make sure your trolling motor is not connected to any batteries or power source, just so you don't electrocute yourself while you're in here working. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to remove the 6 screws that hold on this top plate. They're located right down here on the bottom of the motor. They're just a regular number 2 Phillips head. You can pull those out and this top cover will come off. So once you have those screws removed, all you're going to do is just gently lift up this top, but don't try to pull it off just yet because there is some wires that are attached up here. And that's going to be for this battery gauge right up here. And what you'll need to do is there's going to be a red and a black wire. They're both just quick connects and they will pull apart just like this. And that will allow you to remove the top. All right, so when you open this up, you're going to notice a few wires. You got your 2 wires that were just disconnected that went to the battery gauge. You've got this black wire over here. This one is your main battery negative. Then you got this red and black wire right here. This is your main battery positive. So this one actually goes out along with this one and it connects to your battery. And then you got this red wire here and this black wire here. These are the 2 wires that actually go down to the bottom of the trolling motor and what turns the motor to spin the propeller. The first thing we want to do is disconnect these 2 wires right here, the black negative and the red positive that is going out to the battery. This red one is on there and sometimes you have to force it a little bit, but just wiggle it back and forth and it will come out. So we'll pull this red wire off. So that is our 2 battery connections. I'm going to leave them over there. And then this red wire that goes down to the prop shaft and this black one right here that goes over to the prop, we're going to leave these over here on this side. All right, so before you actually go connecting any wires, the next thing you're going to need to do is decide whether you want to keep this battery gauge on top of the motor head here. There is a way to hook this back up, and if you want to use this with sealed lead acid batteries or AGM batteries, you can do that and it will work just fine. If you're going to use this with a lithium battery, there's really no point in hooking this back up because the way that this gauge actually functions is it reads the battery voltage. And on a lead acid, like a traditional style battery, as you use the battery, the voltage slowly goes down, and that's how this thing's intended to work. But with a lithium battery, they continue to put out the same amount of voltage until the battery is just dead. So it really defeats the purpose of even having this anymore. If you're using a lithium battery, you would need like either some kind of gauge built into the battery. If you have one of those batteries that has like an external screen, you would use that instead. Or if you have a battery like the Powerhouse that we sell, you can use the app to check how much battery life you have left on your phone. But for those of you who want to know how to hook it up, I'm going to show you how to do that. The first thing you need to do is look at the wires here. They are usually stuffed into this little hole. And because of that, it does tend to fray the wires pretty bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut both of these wires back behind where they're kind of indented on this one and where this one is actually frayed. I'm going to cut this one back right here, and I'm going to cut this one back right here. All right, these are both super thin, but I'm going to go ahead and strip them back. I believe they're like a 22 gauge wire, maybe even smaller than that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some similar sized wire. What I've got here is 18 gauge, and I just cut a couple of pieces. They're about maybe 6 inches long or so. And I'm going to strip the ends of these off so that I can extend those wires just a little bit to give me some more working room once I go to hook everything up. I'm going to twist the end up real good and then install this 16 to 22 gauge butt connector. Give that a good squeeze. Twist this wire really good. And I will install this butt connector here. Then I'll do the same thing for the black wire. So I'm going to set this off to the side for now. We can get all these connections done and then we'll install this. So next part is pretty simple. We are going to cut the 2 red wires and cut the 2 black wires. We're just going to cut the connectors off and strip them back just a little bit. And we're going to install a 10 to 12 gauge butt connector. I've got the ones with heat shrink already built into them. So just make sure you twist these up really good, and I will give these a good crimp. And then same thing for the other red wires. If you're not installing your battery gauge, you're just going to connect the 2 red wires together and connect the 2 black wires together and just leave these dangling inside. If you're going to connect the battery gauge back up, before you hook up the 2 red wires together, you need to add in the red wire from the battery gauge. That's what's going to help you read the voltage. I'm just going to wrap that around here so that it gets tied in with my other red wire, and then I will put that into the butt connector. Give it a good crimp, check your connection, make sure it's nice and tight, and we're good to go for the red wire. Then we're just going to repeat the same process for the black wires. And once we're done, we'll just check our connections, make sure everything's nice and tight, and we're good to go. The last thing you're going to need is, if you use butt connectors that have heat shrink built into them, you go ahead and heat shrink it. It's really not 100% necessary. They don't get a ton of water up inside these units, but we already have the heat shrink built into the butt connector, so we're going to go ahead and heat shrink them. This next step is totally optional. You don't have to do this, but I kind of like the way it looks without a handle on it, so we're going to just lift up this handle just a little bit. You don't want to put too much pressure on it because you will break it. Just want to slide this off. And then you'll see there is a screw right here. You'll need to get a Phillips head screwdriver, take that off, and that will allow you to remove the entire handle assembly. And then this whole thing will slide off. Now, if you want to cap the end of this, you can do a couple of different things. You can cut the end of this off and like glue it in there. I've seen people use PVC caps. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. I'm not sure what we're going to do with this one yet, so we'll leave that off for now. All right, so the last step is to get all of this wiring back in. Now, you have to be careful when you go to install this, because this round part right here has to fit over this old throttle controller. Now, you can, I believe, remove this. I'm not going to go through the trouble of trying to wiggle this thing out. So if you don't want to remove it, like I'm not going to remove it, all you'll need to do is come in here, push your wires down into that little slot so that they stay out of the way. We do the same thing with the black wire over here. Push it down into that slot so it stays out of the way. The black wire on this side has to be tucked in between the wall right here and where this screw hole is. That's where one of the screws that actually mounts the top to the bottom goes. You got to push it down in there and kind of hold it in place. And then you're going to do the same thing with all of these wires over here. You're going to have to push them down in between this wall and where that screw hole goes. It is the only way that you will be able to fit all these wires back in there. And then once you have those in place, then you can set this on top and just keep steady pressure on it. Make sure those wires are not in the way. So on this side, the wires keep popping up, so I'm actually going to push those down while I'm installing this to keep it out of the way. And then once that's installed, all you have to do is put your screws back in the bottom, and all this will be held together, and you're good to go. Now, word of caution, once you bypass this, as soon as you hook this straight up to a battery, the prop is going to start spinning. This is only if you're going to use this for an Autoboat unit. Now, after you've done the bypassing of the EnduraMax digital maximizer or whatever brand maximizer that you have in your particular trolling motor, you can go right back to following the instructions for installing the Autoboat. And it's a very simple process. You're going to hook up your positive and negative wire from your trolling motor to the black box on the Autoboat unit. It's very simple. And then you're going to connect the Autoboat black box to your battery. So instead of having your throttle control being here on your trolling motor or the digital maximizer actually controlling the throttle, your Autoboat black box is now going to be what controls your throttle. We have a link to that video right down here in the description box if you want to go check that out. If you want to check out the Autoboat unit, you can find that over at tbnation.net. If you have any questions or comments, you feel free to leave them down in the description box below.
Good thing I'm